Idiot's Guide to Goethe. I don't know very much about Goethe, except how to pronounce his name, and I tried to read one of his books. I'm going to give you everything I know about him, and the reason I'm doing so is I'm feeling despondent, and I wanted to make sure that I was using that word correctly. I feel despondent. And I believe I used it correctly. Despondency is feeling or showing extreme discouragement, dejection or depression, despairing, desperate, forlorn, hopeless. So what does one do when one feels despondent, having lost all or nearly all hope? Feeling a deep dejection arising from a conviction of the uselessness of further effort. This feeling this slipping away of all hope and despairing, prompted by reckless action or violence in the face of defeat. I'm just kind of reading all the definitions at once. Yeah, I'm feeling very despondent, and I think it's appropriate to feel despondent in 2025 on March, where are we? 9th? Yeah, on March 9th. You have every right to feel despondent. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do when you feel like this? Well, what you do is you reach back to the source, the sources, where this all came from, the original thinkers, the original people. I'm 47 years old, and I have a childhood friend who ended up becoming a philosophy professor, for lack of a better term. It's really not the technical term of it. Whatever, he's got a PhD in, I don't know, social, political, whatever. And I asked him one time, how do you read philosophy? And he always asserted to me that the best way to read philosophy is to start with the source. Right? Start with Plato, then move to Aristotle, then move to the later people, then move to I don't know. I don't even remember their names. Before Nietzsche, there were some people before the pre-Nietzscheans. You could even go to the pre-Socratics, before Socrates, right? But always go to the source. And in this troubled, despondent time that we are living in, it is almost extreme, almost like blindingly apparent, or opposite of blindingly. It's unbelievably apparent that we got to start going back to the sources. We got to start going back to reading books. We're seeing how film and cinema is dying. We're seeing how this whole facade, for lack of a better word, how everything's just fake. And what is truth anymore? It's all being trivialized. So, what do you do? What do you do when you feel despondent? You go back to the source. And Goethe is one of the sources. So I'm going to tell you everything I think I know about Goethe. Having read very little of him. And then I'm going to cross-check it with ChatGPT's quick rundown on Goethe. Firstly, the name Goethe, okay? The problem is that it's spelt Goethe. So when you read it, you're reading Goethe. Goethe. So when I was a kid, I just read Goethe. Goethe. But in German, there is no R. Okay? That's one thing that you should know about the German language. German. There's no ah. So Goethe. It's not pronounced Goethe. It's pronounced Goethe. Goethe. So it's almost like there's an R. But that's only for people who speak my language. So there actually isn't an R. But you're better off saying Goethe than Goethe. the best way of saying it is Goethe. Anyways, now that we've gotten that figured out, his name was, he had a von in his name. Von? Okay, his full name was Johann Wolfgang, really? Wolfgang von Goethe, right? Now the thing is that you need to know, when your name is Von, when you've got that name attached to your last name, that denotes nobility, as opposed to Ludwig van Beethoven. Van Beethoven doesn't mean shit. It means you're nothing. That doesn't mean shit. But when you're Von, that's like, okay, you're a nobleman. So this guy Goethe, he was like a high level dude. He was like an aristocrat back in the day. So Goethe was born August 28th, 1749 in Frankfurt. Okay, now what's interesting about 1749? I can tell you a few things. 1749 was 7 years before Mozart was born. And that is what I know about 1749. And he was born in Frankfurt, which was then the Holy Roman Empire. Now, the interesting thing about the Holy Roman Empire, a lot of people don't know this. They just think, oh, Holy Roman Empire, whatever. Rome. No. The Holy Roman Empire was Germany back then. His father was a lawyer and his mother was an artist. And he went to study law at the University of Leipzig. But then, you know what? He was like, I'm more into literature and poetry and the arts. And he devoted his entire life to that. Let's get back to my despondency. I believe that movies are dead now. We have no identity, we have no nothing anymore. Because film is dead, we are going to have to go back to books. Just like we're going to have to go back to record players instead of, MP3s. We're going to have to go back to paintings, like real paintings that you paint, like physically paint, rather than JPEGs. Now, as far as I know, Nietzsche, the philosopher Nietzsche, whose name is impossible to spell. I'm 47 years old and I still don't know how to spell Nietzsche. I know how to pronounce it, I just don't know how to spell it. Nietzsche, who invented the idea of the Superman. Apparently, he based his idea of the Superman on Goethe, because this was a guy who was a Renaissance man. Renaissance man, what does that mean? A guy who can do everything exceptionally, particularly in the arts. Now, I tried to read a poem by him, not a poem, it was like a play called Faust, right? And we all know the whole Faust, I hope we all do, Faust story, making a deal with the devil, right? The Faustian bargain. And I don't think he invented Faust. I think that was a very, very old story. But he made his own, he did his own take on it. I tried to read it. It was just impossible to read for me. It's just not my style. But apparently it was incredibly well written and great. I don't know. I tried to read a book of his called Elective Affinities, which already sounds awful, and I really did not enjoy it at all. I think I got halfway through the book and I still had no idea what the hell was going on. And then, but I think what he's most famous, aside from Faust, what he's most famous for is a short story, I think, called The Sorrows of Young Werther. And I did not read this, but what I heard about it is that I guess it's a guy re-examining his life, and I think he commits suicide at the end of the story. And what happened after that book was published was everybody who read it, not everybody, but a lot of people who read it, started killing themselves. And then that became known as the Werther effect. It's spelled Werther, but in German every W is pronounced like V, and every V is pronounced as a W. So it's not Volkswagen, it's not Volkswagen, it's Volkswagen. Right. And there was a little tale that I read at one point where Goethe met Beethoven, and they were walking down the street, and they bumped into some noblemen, and Goethe bowed in respect, and Beethoven kind of just said fuck off. And Goethe said, you can't talk to them like that. And Beethoven says, yeah, whatever, they're all idiots anyways, who cares, fuck them. Also, Goethe was something of a scientist. He contributed to color theory. I watched an entire lecture about how he had a very different color theory, where I think blue and I don't know, he had different ideas about what the primary colors are. But either way, he gave something to science. And that's everything I know. So now I'm just going to read the rest from the ChatGTP breakdown of his life. Because, dude, we're despondent. We need everything we can get right now. We need to reach into the past to solve our present problems and foibles. Okay, so here we go. So his early works were filled with romantic ideals, but it was his breakthrough work, The Sorrows of Young Werther, there we go, 1774. So Mozart would have been, he was born in 1756. Mozart would have been 18. That really catapulted him to fame. Tells the story of a young man's unrequited love and his ultimate tragic end. The novel resonated deeply with young readers and caused a stir of echoes in Europe, igniting the Werther fever, in which young men imitated the protagonist's style of dress and behavior. I wouldn't call that. No, there's the Werther effect. I'm sure there's both. Both can exist. Where are we? So following that book, though, his career as a poet, playwright, yeah, he was a playwright, and novelist flourished. His Faust, it was written in 2 parts, forgot about that, often considered his magnum opus, that's just Latin for best thing he ever did, as one of the greatest works in world literature. Wow. That's pretty good. It tells the story of a man who, dissatisfied with his life, makes a pact with the devil, selling his soul for knowledge and pleasure. And the play, it's a play. It delves, I tried to read it. It was really difficult to read. It delves into themes of ambition, redemption, the nature of good and evil, and the quest for self-understanding. Okay, now, Goethe was also instrumental in the development of Weimar Classicism. I don't know what the hell that is. Wow, that's new. In this world where everything's new, this is new. A movement that sought to combine the ideals of the Enlightenment with the emotional depth of Romanticism. I don't know this crap. I don't know anything about this stuff. Alongside his close friend, the philosopher Friedrich Schiller. Okay, I know Schiller. I've read some of Schiller's stuff. Friedrich Schiller. Yeah, I've read some of his stuff. You know who was a fan of Schiller? I think was Schopenhauer. And the person who was a fan of Schopenhauer was Nietzsche. I'm almost positive about that. So Goethe sought to create works that were not only artistically sophisticated, but that also contributed to the moral and intellectual progress of society. Now, I want to interrupt the narrative to say that one of my favorite quotes, I re-quote this all the time, is by Goethe. And the quote is as follows. Art is not for the masses. Art is for the individual. Anyone who makes art for the masses is in error. Now, that is already just so profound. Like, I love it. I live by that, right? Like, it's not about whether I've got 1 million YouTube followers. It's about whether I've got 1 YouTube follower. It's about you do things for the individual. And I'm not saying my YouTube channel is art, but whatever the hell it is you're doing, you do it for the individual. If you get one person who's profoundly affected, that's what you're going for. You're not trying to be Britney Spears and have 1 billion dimwits who are singing your stupid song that means nothing. It's not about the masses. And it taught me also that, like, rather than just calling somebody an idiot or, oh, he's really smart, he's really stupid, Goethe goes, he's more sophisticated than me. And he says, no, they're not the stupid people, they're the masses. And don't call them the smart people, call them the individual, right? So he doesn't say stupid or smart, he says masses or individuals. So that's one of the best quotes I ever heard. Anywho, blah blah blah. One of Goethe's key ideas was the importance of harmony between the rational and the emotional. He believed that art and life should aim for balance, and that individuals should strive for self-realization and enlightenment. Who can disagree with that? Well, probably a lot of politicians. As a scientist and a thinker, he was deeply involved in the sciences, particularly in areas like botany, I think that's the study of plants, anatomy, and color theory. Yeah, I read about some of his color theory ideas. His work on the theory of colors, though not accepted in the scientific community in his time, laid the groundwork for later studies in perception and psychology. Goethe believed that scientific inquiry should not be limited to cold, detached reasoning, but should engage with the senses and emotions. I'm not sure if I agree with that part. His studies on plants, particularly his work on the metamorphosis of plants, were groundbreaking and showed his capacity for observing and describing nature in an incredibly detailed way. The future of art, literature, and science makes Goethe a Renaissance figure of the modern era. What would we call this era to 2025? Maybe the stupid era? There was the Dark Ages. These are the, like, dumb fuck blind as a bat era. Personal philosophy and influence. His philosophy and personal philosophy was a profound humanism. He was deeply interested in the complexities of human existence and the ways in which individuals interact with society, nature, and the divine. His works often... You got to understand when he says the divine, everybody back then was religious, okay? I think like 90% of Isaac Newton's writings were about God, okay? So you just got to get over the fact that back then, everybody wrote about God all the time. They were very religious. It was a big, like, you couldn't say something like God is dead. Certainly not during Goethe's time, and Nietzsche didn't have a very good time when he said that. His works often reflect a struggle between personal desires and societal expectations, and he championed the idea of self-realization through continuous self-improvement. Okay, well, every self-help book does that. But I guess this guy was the first self-help guy. His ideas have influenced a vast array of fields from psychology and philosophy to the arts. His works inspired writers like Nietzsche, I told you, Thomas Mann, I hate Thomas Mann, and Hermann Hesse, I hate Hermann Hesse. Hermann Hesse wrote a book called Beowulf. I hate Hermann Hesse. That's too bad. And his thoughts on nature, humanity, and society continue to resonate with readers worldwide. His legacy. Okay, so he died in 1832. And I think Dostoevsky was born in 1821. So that would mean he died when Dostoevsky was 10 years old. Or 11. Interesting. But his influence has endured. His works are translated into nearly every language, and his ideas continue to shape literature, philosophy, and even politics. Faust remains a touchstone in world literature, while his poems, such as The Erkling, never heard of it, and Prometheus, he didn't invent that word, are widely studied for their lyrical beauty and depth of meaning. And by the way, it's very hard to write poetry in German, because nothing rhymes. In Italian, everything rhymes. But that's a different story. In conclusion, his life and works reflect the diversity and complexity of human experience. Whether as a poet, philosopher, or scientist, he never confined himself to one discipline, and his intellectual curiosity drove him to explore the deep questions of life, love, and existence. His legacy continues to inspire generations of thinkers, artists, and readers, and his works remain an essential part of the literary canon. I have to correct what I said. Hermann Hesse did not write Beowulf. He wrote Steppenwolf, which was a terrible book. I hate his writing. I hate Thomas Mann. Maybe I'm wrong for hating him. I do know that Hermann Hesse was kind of just a bullshit, offspring, like a wannabe. He was like Green Day is to Nirvana. He was like, NSYNC is to Backstreet Boys. If we're gonna use like modern geniuses as an example. Now, just because I didn't really get into Goethe as a reader, I never really read much of his stuff, doesn't mean there isn't something very cool there. My favorite author is Dostoevsky. And I don't understand Tolstoy. Tolstoy bores me to death. But that doesn't mean... Sorry, somebody's calling me. That doesn't mean that he's... That doesn't mean that Tolstoy's nothing. Obviously, he's huge. I'm doing a YouTube video.
Oh, okay. But are you watching the he's our Prime Minister gonna be?
No.
Okay, I'll tell you. John Grisham on now. Trudeau's getting a standing ovation from every single politician.
Trudeau's getting a standing ovation.
Yeah, because they're all standing up when they talk about him.
Alright, I'll watch it now. I'm going to pause my video and watch it now.
It's on Channel 5.
That's actually pretty good that I got a phone call while I was talking about Goethe, while I was trying to dig back into the times when people were smarter. And I got interrupted by somebody saying, oh, Trudeau, somebody lost the election, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? The world's screwed. We're all going to die. There's one thing I forgot to mention, which is pretty cool, for me anyways, considering that I'm Italian descent. Apparently Goethe wrote a book about his travels in Italy. Like, he lived in Italy for like 2 years. And ever since then, my German friend told me this. Ever since then, every German who wants to consider themselves to be a sophisticated German will spend a considerable amount of time in Germany. because that's how much Goethe raised Germany's opinion of Italy. Also, though, I wouldn't give it all thanks to Goethe. It's also just because Italians are so effing opposite to Germans. Germans love rules. Italians just break rules. If you've ever been to Italy, you would know. It's pretty hilarious.